My name is David Landris Van Vactor. I am a draftsman, oil painter, and raconteur. And I've written about 6 novels. Uh, I'm about to publish a new one, and our new magazine called The Pequod, like the great whale ship that Ahab was the captain of. And one night when I was first married, I had one of my favorite Harvard professors, Richard Poirier, to dinner, and cooked him a Turnado Rossini, which is a magnificent filet mignon, uh, and a fresh artichoke heart scooped out of those little fuzzy things that you don't want to swallow, which are seeds actually, like milkweed. And in the center of that little cup, artichoke cup, you put béarnaise sauce, and you do it on a crouton, which you have covered with a nice slice of a pate, like pate de pate de canard or pate foie gras, and then uh, that includes the artichoke heart filled with béarnaise sauce, the rare beautiful piece of filet mignon, and and then I think I made a trifle for dessert. But during dinner, with my wife Anita there, who was his best student, and later went on to Rutgers, where he became chairman of Rutgers English department to get a PhD. We moved down from Chicago after my Chicago business adventure, running my grandfather's firm, String Packing Corporation. And at his dinner, I told him the stories one of which I'm going to tell you about my father's uncle, Lincoln Van Vactor, called Uncle Link, 6'4", 240 pounds, a giant, and so big that everybody, when my grandfather turned 18, said, well, for his birthday celebration, they said, why don't you get Uncle Link over here and have a wrestling match? Let's see who can who see if you can beat your brother. Well, anyway, they wrestled for 5 hours until my grandfather had a heart failure. He could have died. Uh, anyway, not too long after that, Uncle Link got in a fight in a bar, and there was always being challenged by people in Argus because he's the biggest young man in town, and he to get this person off. I mean, he had to hit him, and he hit him so hard he knocked him through the saloon doors and across the street. The guy didn't wake up for 3 days. That was Uncle Link. Finally, he got tired of being challenged all the time and bothered by people. And somehow I don't think he'd fallen in love or had a girlfriend trying to get him interested in marriage. And he said, I'm just going to be a hermit. So he started buying up books he wanted to read. And probably his high school education in August was limited. And he got this big trunk and filled it up with books. And he's going to move to Colorado just to become a hermit and read and educate himself. Next thing you know, the sheriff in the town they'd moved to sends a letter to my grandfather, who was a Church of Christ preacher at that time, and said, "Your brother has been found dead. We think was shot by a pistol and then run over by a team of horses. And we believe it may have been over a land dispute. They were obviously arguing about boundaries. And typically in the Van Vactor family, there's this kind of strain of irascibility and anger, like I call it the anger gene. I mean, my father was very irascible, had a, a, a violent temper, a tendency to tantrums, and I always said his father should have given him a good whipping every once in a while, or strapping with a belt. And the trouble is, my my grandfather, David Ellsworth Van Vactor, was a very big man, had big hands. One time he hit his daughter Anna Catherine so hard that he actually hurt her, bruised her badly, and her mother, my grandmother Matilda Fenstermacher Van Vactor, called May Van Vactor, said, David, never again lay a hand on one of our children. I forbid you to do that. So I think it's because of that that he didn't. When my father got out of hand and asked him or whatever, um, is that he had this censure that he was not couldn't do that. But the best thing that could have happened to my father is to really get a licking. One of these times he lost his temper. I mean, one time he sat up to bed without dinner when he made some remark about I asked what was for dinner, so I didn't want that. Doesn't sound good to me or something. He said, his father said, well, just get on up to bed then. You're not going to have your dinner. And my father never forgot that. You could hear them, everybody slurping over the food, and he was up in the stairwell above the stairs, listening to people enjoying dinner. And you know, he was always a huge eater when he was finally prosperous and had good jobs. So much so that he gobbled his food. My mother put a mirror behind her so he could see himself and how terrible his dinner manners were. He'd look at himself in the mirror behind her, and she was a very picky eater and way too thin, and had a lot of illnesses and before I was born, and then some after, serious illnesses like endometriosis, and had to have an operation for that. Finally, that was all fixed up. She had some good health for years, and died at 84 in Boston, where we brought her back from LA, where she and my father were at a beautiful apartment in Century City in a gated community right near Fox Studios Tower. And so that's sort of one story in a quick capsule. And anyway, after this dinner, and I told this story about Uncle Link, Richard Poyer said to me, Davey, you got those are sagas. You got to write novels about that. So I have actually written quite a bit about them, and not particularly about Abraham Lincoln Van Vactor, but some about. I mean, these YouTubes are really sketches for novels or little long stories that could be novellas or short novels. Uh, the These people had hard lives. They worked hard. They were pioneer stock. They really settled this country, and of course, part of that was the Indian problem. And one of the times my grandmother May cried for 5 days when the American the Native Americans that lived near Argus whom she gotten to know were shipped off to a reservation. And I mean, there's some terrible things that were done. And I mean, starting in Boston after the Pilgrims arrived, and I saw there was actually a picture of some Native Americans at Thanksgiving sitting that seaside looking out to sea, and these were people who did not ever celebrate Thanksgiving. You know, they were, one of the tribes was given blankets that were full of disease, and a whole bunch of people died of that. I mean, there were terrible things that happened. And then the French and Indian War, and Indians, children sent off to these industrial schools and not allowed to speak their native language. And then, I mean, I could go on and on. That's why I'm calling this new publication that will replace our very successful CANTO Review of the Arts. I'm calling it Pequot Review. And then I think I'll have a section where Sequoia speaks, and he will give political prison blogs in Pequot, or editorials denouncing certain people, like Obama's use of the espionage law, and his being able to, through a court of appeals, and as almost like an executive order, he actually the right in the law that could be entail indefinite detention without due process by the military in a military facility, which are Chris Hedges and then I think somebody else, maybe Daniel Ellsberg, signed on to that law, and Obama was able to just have it annulled, and just, it's absolutely outrageous. I mean, I would, there's a special place in hell for people like that. And the fact he never got Gitmo closed, when they went on hunger strike there, he was force feeding them, but the American Medical Association deemed that a form of torture, and he's, you know, has managed to get poor Chelsea Manning, now a transsexualized woman by the name of Chelsea Manning, put him in prison for life, and they tend to use solitary confinement, another practice that has been deemed torture by international lawyers for the Geneva Conventions. And also there's an obligation under international law that any kind of elected official that is with the office of the presidency or attorney general is under obligation to prosecute these people. And there are just countless examples of solitary confinement, interrogation techniques, and this latest $6,000 report done by the CIA, which Dianne Feinstein and her staff were able to complete and keep from being stonewalled and covered up by these efforts to keep it from being released. You know, I think they spent something like $20 million to keep it being from release, and hired these psychiatrists for $80,000 to write all this garbage. I mean, and you have somebody like John Brennan saying that there are errors in it. I mean, I wouldn't believe any of that stuff. Pardon me for going on a political rant, but one other thing I want to say about my father is that he had a wonderful way of, revising his works, and or being very careful in his original sketches for a symphony or a concerto or others, a variety of chamber music. One thing he did, which was very, very practical and ingenious, was to write with a um, fine line pencil, write his parts and even the orchestral score. And this he could get printed at a local printer for very little money. And it would come out looking like it was ink because the pencil lines printed black. And it was very ingenious, and he was able to publish a lot of his music, and nicely bound with saddle stitching, which are just stapling in the folded seam of the score or parts. And very reasonably, before his favorite student, bass player in the symphony orchestra, Roger Rhodes, formed his own company, Roger Rhodes Limited, and published all his works. And Roger has even personally recopied the Seventh Symphony, getting up at 4 in the morning and working a few hours. And then he's now printed that, the Seventh Symphony, which has never been performed. And there's some very nice printed scores of the Walden Symphony, never performed, should be performed in Boston, by text by Henry David Thoreau, a Harvard graduate like me. And I was given the job by my father of selecting the best lines, which are really like lines of poetry. They're so beautifully written. I mean, the prose, poetic prose of Thoreau is so marvelous. They're as good as most lines of poems are great poems. And so my father dedicated the Fourth Symphony, this choral symphony. It was performed by the Maryville Choir and an ad hoc orchestra in Knoxville about in the spring of 1962, 3 weeks after Nicholas was born. We went down, and Dick Trizell's mother, Kai Trizell, came over and babysat so we could go to the concert. Pat and I and my sister Raven and my mother, and are in a picture. The News Sentinel sent a photographer down to take a picture before, a nice 8x10 glossy, and from that, Nicholas did a wonderful drawing of the whole family, my father, mother, sister, me, and a picture of himself cradled in his mother's lap. My sister Raven, my mother Virginia, Mary Virginia, Landers Van Vactor, me and Raven and Nicholas as a baby on the lap of his mother. A beautiful pencil drawing or ink drawing of the whole family on my side. At the time of right after his birth, when that performance of Walden's Choral Symphony was done in Knoxville at the Bijou Theater on Gay Street. My life is full of stories, and I have just now ended this new addition to my YouTube, the whole series of High Hurdler, Fontana Lake, and my Riva, Jacques, Claude, and me, about Riva Borenstein and Jacques Lanzmann and his brother Claude, who created the great Holocaust documentary called Shoah, in which you would go and find the people who had actually responsible, the Polish railroad people who had gone and were responsible for transporting people who had been captured in Paris, taken out to Dancy on buses, and later transported to Auschwitz and to their deaths. show is the most important work on the Holocaust in my mind, because it's actually evidence, verbatim evidence of the involvement of those who perpetrated this atrocity, which the Catholic Church really allowed to happen, and was, I think, responsible in certain ways for. This is a French Catholic Church during the Vichy regime of Pétain. They not only allowed it to happen, but they allowed people like Klaus Barbie to come and round up people. It was one of the worst SS people that I think Jacques Vergès actually, because as he said, every criminal needs a lawyer, deserves a lawyer. He defended Klaus Barbie, which is outrageous. I mean, he didn't get him all, but he did. There had to be a trial, so there had to be a lawyer, and it was Jacques Vergès, actually, whose relatives on the Ile de Réunion, where Amélie Poe, Nicholas's recent fiance, comes from. He had this lawyer who defended bombers, Algerian women bombers, and actually married two of them and had children by them. Jacques Vergès defended Klaus Barbie, and his brothers were elected to public office on the Ile de Réunion in the Indian Ocean, where that horrible black site is, called, the island is called Diego, I think, Rodriguez, right in the Indian Ocean. There's a black site. It was a Navy base that was turned into a black site where people were renditioned to be tortured, and some killed in process of being tortured. There's a lot of politics going on. I mean, there's a lot happening, especially with these CIA torture records revealed in this 6,000-page report. And well, anybody who's responsible will be punished for that. So this sort of thing doesn't happen. Unfortunately, it's dubious. I doubt it. No, people just go unpublished. They talk about a country which lives by the rule of law, but where are the prosecution and actual prison sentences or other forms of punishment for these actions that might deter further examples taking place? And hereby I end this video. I probably should avoid political discourse of this kind, but all this stuff is in my head, and it's just inevitable. I unload it, and I have an opportunity to speak about and tell my stories, the family stories of this big saga by my Dutch ancestors who arrived in 1632. Of course, my English ancestors in 1755 with a 33 and a third thousand acre land grant from the King of England to the family of Sir Edward Lewis, whose relatives like Meriwether Lewis, Robert E. Lee, their grandmother, and their grandmother's sister of George Washington, and then others. And the family that went back, the Porteouses and their daughter Mildred, married an earl and married thereby into the Bowes-Lyons family, whereby I am a distant cousin of the Queen Mother of our present Queen Elizabeth, and also grandmother of Prince Charles. All that will be confirmed with genealogical records, and when I I bring some of these facts to the attention of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth. And good day to you. Thank you for your patience. And God bless. I'm signing off. Nicholas! Nicholas! He's out, David. He's not here. But I mean, I want to. He just walked me out near the house, isn't he? No. Where is he? He took a walk with Jade. Well, how far did they go? Not too far to go out to. Close the door. He'll fix the thing when he comes back. I don't want to lose it. It's good. Well, he knows how to do it. Okay, I need a little reward. I need, if possible, to find smaller section. No, no. stream coming out of the church number. Thank you, one. No, not